Welcome to Startup Health TV. This is a health innovation update. I'm Logan Plaster, Editor-in-Chief at StartUpHealth, and I'm happy to be joined today by Stacie, Ruth, and Nirinjan from AireHealth. In June, it was announced that AireHealth acquired Breath Research in a merger that was designed to help build the industry's first virtual care platform for respiratory illness. Stacie Ruth is the CEO and co-founder of AireHealth. Nirinjan was the founder of Breath Research, which I know, among other things, was working on machine learning and using AI and ML to analyze breath sounds. And then she came on as AireHealth's head of innovation after the merger. So excited to have both of you on the show today. Welcome, Stacie and Nirinjan.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So let's start with the challenges that you are addressing. We'll get into the merger and COVID-19, but let's just talk about what the big barriers are in respiratory health right now, and also kind of where you draw the boundaries around respiratory health for any viewers that aren't specialists in the area. Maybe Stacie, you could start.
Absolutely. So I love drawing those boundaries, right? So first of all, respiratory care has not really made it to the forefront until the last couple of months. We think a lot about cardiology. We think a lot about diabetes. We think a lot about cancer. What you haven't heard a lot of in the innovation circles is how are we going to take better care of our lungs? How are we going to help the 100+ million people who are respiratory compromised in the US? And so that's what AireHealth is up to. We had this journey planned out. We've only been around for a couple of years, but what we really wanted to do was accelerate the potential for people to care more for their own lungs in the home. And we've seen so much change over the past couple of months. We will get into why Breath Research, why the new AireHealth and the accelerated direction of a platform. But what we came to the table with was a connected nebulizer, so a way to deliver medication to the lung. And when you connect that nebulizer to a companion application, what you're able to do is not only track symptoms, but some of the triggers that are causing you to have a negative impact to your lung. And for people who are chronic, they may or may not know what their triggers are, but they certainly know when their symptoms are accelerating. And what we've done is we've really accelerated toward being able to give that patient in the home and their providers tools to be able to know if their symptoms are accelerating, if their condition is exacerbating. And we're going to do our very best to help keep these people out of the emergency room and to prevent bounce backs after they've had post-acute, after they've had an acute episode. But I'll let Nirinjan talk to you a little bit about the technology itself and how we're bringing forward many of the assets and the plans that were in place with Breath Research.
Great, yes. So it's very exciting bringing our two companies together and all of our technology and IP to build a connected at-home respiratory care platform that manages drug delivery, adherence, pulmonary testing, symptom tracking, and vital signs monitoring. And what we're doing is we're getting real-time data from a connected pocket nebulizer and our connected spirometer with built-in lung sound analysis. And that's all going to an AI-based platform so that we'll be able to inform patients, caregivers, and clinicians of a respiratory change that might be happening, with our goal to enable proactive care before the condition becomes acute.
Let's get really practical and talk about a patient example. Pre-COVID, what were a patient's limitations at home trying to monitor their health? Give me a really prototypical patient and the lengths that they would have to go to really monitor their health, their lung health.
Sure, I can speak to that. So let's take severe asthma or COPD, for example. The way it was before COVID and a little bit now is just in order to test your lungs for your lung capacity, or to get anything, any knowledge about your lung sounds, you'd have to make a visit. You'd have to see a physician or a clinician to listen to your lungs, and you'd have to go to a pulmonologist's office or a pulmonary function lab to be tested. And that typically happens once or twice a year. And meanwhile, in between all that, the one thing that happens with our lungs and respiratory system is it's changing. And respiratory attacks, you think of an exacerbation or a respiratory attack like a heart attack, okay? But it's your lungs instead of your heart. And just like in all the other systems of our body, things develop over time. And that's really true with a respiratory patient or someone with COPD who might have an exacerbation that's developing under the radar until they're in the emergency room or in the hospital.
So it's really,
that's kind of where we've been.
Interesting. So what you're saying, and I've heard this across so many different verticals, it's not about these episodic moments in time. It's about trends, and it's about being able to track trends that might be a little under the radar.
Yes, and another thing that hasn't been tracked is a lot of respiratory patients have specific medications that are nebulized, that are using a nebulizer, and so that the medication can go directly to the lungs very effectively and efficiently. But there's been no way for that to happen effectively in the home or for it to be tracked. And one of the things that we're actually hearing from patients is that they may take their medication and then not be feeling well, and then 4 hours later want to take it again and not remember if they've taken it before. Could be common if you're on the computer in between or something. Could happen to the best of us. So the medication tracking is super important. We've seen that with companies like Propeller Health with tracking inhalers is equally important on nebulized medications. And when we think about COVID, right now we've got remdesivir is being developed. They're starting to use corticosteroids and biologics. All those medications will be nebulized. And so there's going to be a huge need to have that be in the home and to have it be tracked by both the patients and their clinicians.
Yes.
All right. Well, you brought up COVID. There's so much we don't know about the coronavirus, but we do know that there are, long-term fears of lung damage, and we're seeing lung damage. I know one founder within the StartUpHealth community who 3 months later is still dealing with sore lungs, the difficulty breathing, going on a light jog. So talk to me about what the last 3-4 months have taught you specifically about COVID-19. I mean, you're in the respiratory health field. What are you seeing?
Well, I think we're all learning about it. We're actually applying for a couple of grants. So we've been digging in deep to COVID-19 and learning that we're learning a couple of things. One thing that we're learning, I'm sure that everyone's aware of, is that we're starting to be able to diagnose the disease. We're having testing in some states anyway. We're having COVID testing. But what we're not able to track is the course of the disease very well. And so we don't know if you're diagnosed with COVID, we don't know if you're not going to have any symptoms, if you're going to have upper respiratory symptoms, or if in 10 days you're going to end up on a ventilator. So that's a very important piece to track that we are like jumping all over, because we've developed a technology over 10 years that's really set up to do just that. The other thing we're learning about COVID is that what you're talking about, there's post-COVID. And I have someone actually in my neighborhood who is similar, who has been recovering from COVID for 3 months. And we're now learning about different types of lung damage and respiratory symptoms that he has and that other people post-COVID have. Along with a lot of other symptoms as well. And I think that AireHealth is very well positioned in this space with, with three things: the ability to deliver medication in a portable, efficient way and track that medication, the ability to measure what's going on in your lungs, your respiratory response to the disease, whatever stage you're at, and a whole complete care platform with artificial intelligence that can begin notifying patients, clinicians, and all the stakeholders in health, so that as an individual and as a community and as a nation, we can begin getting a handle on this.
Stacie, question for you. Obviously, I mentioned it at the top that that you merged AireHealth with Breath Research, announced that in early June. Talk me through why now was the time for that, and this is actually an interesting time to go through a merger. So, so what was it like, and why reach out to Breath Research? Or I actually don't know which direction the arrangement began, but what was that like over the last few months?
Well, it's a great story, but I'll start with the end. And I believe that after hearing Nirinjan speak about what the capabilities are when we bring them together, I think it's very clear when you hear her and the passion behind it, you understand what this has enabled and the ability that we will have to save lungs and lives for us, kind of putting aside our own individual business desires and goals. And when combining them, look at the bigger impact that we're going to be able to have. So that very reason is why I knew from running businesses, and I was a health tech general manager for many years at a large company. And I knew that the secret was for us to look for opportunities to accelerate our roadmap when we experienced this downturn. I'm going to call it this hiccup that happened in the market. And at the beginning of March, you know, I knew that the choices were that we either tightened down, right, kind of put our heads down. We either accelerated and went forward, or we looked for ways to accelerate through a partnership. And that's exactly where we found Nirinjan and Breath Research. So she presented, and she was presenting as a top 15 or 16 COVID company very early on that was positioning the wares. And she had the forethought to close her presentation with, "We can't do this alone." And then I really started to lean in and listen. And in fact, we believe the best thing that we could do would be to align our resources with a company who is complementary to us. And 3 days later, we're behind some NDAs and starting to talk. And it was only a couple of weeks later that we said, we're not sure the mechanism, which ended up being a merger agreement between the two companies, but we're going to put our assets together and see what happens. And that was the end of March, and we closed at the end of June.
Besides the willingness to collaborate, which is a theme that we talk about so much in Startup Health, what was another mindset that you saw in Nirinjan that made you realize this is somebody I want on my team? This is a chance for you to, you know, give Nirinjan that compliment you haven't given her yet.
We give each other a lot, but
That's
I'll
good.
give her one. I'll give her one more. So not only the willingness to collaborate and to have our businesses collaborate and to partner, but I knew that what she wanted to do was to make an impact in the lives of people that had respiratory conditions. And I think that you have to have that mindset. If you are going into a health business, health tech, anywhere along that continuum, medical technologies in general, you have to have the mindset of helping the person at the end of the line. And that is definitely what I saw when I met Nirinjan.
Something I like to ask, because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that are relatively early in their process, is really, what will the world look like if you succeed? What will respiratory health look like? Let's say I'm a severe asthmatic in the future, and AireHealth and Breath Research have allowed me to, you know, monitor my health at home, monitor trends. Paint me a picture of what that patient's going to go through if this dream becomes even more of a reality. I know it is a reality, but there's growth that will take place.
Well, first of all, and I'll pass it over to Nirinjan, but first of all, as an individual and as a person, if you have a severe condition of the lung, the first thing you're going to have is less anxiety around your condition. Because the more information that can be put in your hands, very useful information. For instance, I wake up, I do my test, I know if my lungs are reacting in a more healthy or less healthy way than they did the day before. I know whether that means I need to do stress exercises to maybe calm myself. Maybe this is a breathing issue right now, not a lung issue right now. I know whether I've taken my medicine and maybe whether we've reached the point where that therapy is or isn't working the way that it should any longer. And then lastly, I know because of the AireHealth infrastructure, the system, right, the Vital Breath platform, I know at the touch of my fingers whether or not I need to have someone look to help me. Do I need a second look? Do I need to do a telehealth visit? Do I need to make an appointment? Is this an emergency? And helping to identify that for the person, I think that's the future that we're looking for, is that individual taking more control of their condition and knowing exactly what's happening with their lungs.
Anything you want to add to that, Nirinjan?
Yes, that was beautiful, Stacie. I would add to that, if you're a severe asthma patient or you have COPD, that what the world might look like with our platform is that you could have many more days to be active with your family. You may be more productive at work because you'll spend less time in that exacerbated state. It would be like a world without respiratory attacks. So you would be able to, live
like,
your life.
It's like we use respiratory health. It's it's a $10 word for breath, and I love that you have breath in your name and air in AireHealth. That simple need to just have breath in your lungs and what that means for your life. I have a friend who's on assisted breathing, and he wasn't for a time. He has muscular dystrophy. And when he began getting the oxygen that he needed, all of a sudden he was clear-headed and he was able to speak. Yes. And he was able to sleep better. Just like getting the air you need in your body. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. Imagine if the first indication that something's going wrong for you and you have a respiratory condition, what if you woke up and the first thing that was happening was you're short of breath and you have no idea what to do?
So scary.
So scary. So if you really just put yourself in the shoes of the person who will be experiencing this solution, this technology, this enabling of self-care, it just starts with exactly what you said. If you can't breathe, you can't live.
If you're using it daily and you're catching these trends, how early can you catch, how long before the morning that I'm short of breath are we really getting an alert?
Well, one of the things that's interesting that we found in our research at Mayo Clinic, we did a pilot study there, was that pathology sounds, in other words, sounds that indicate disease and disease severity, show up first when you're pushing your lungs the hardest. It shows up second when you're pushing your lungs medium hard. And it may or may not show up, and it eventually shows up when you're breathing at rest. And so that's the beauty of doing predictive testing. And spirometry is a form of predictive testing. And in our platform, we enable 3 tests. One is where just as hard as you can, let's see what you got. And then the second one is like a deep breath that you take at the doctor's office. And the third one is at rest. So we're able to kind of see where your pathology is at all 3 of those. And so we know when it's, when we first see it at a strong effort, and then if it starts moving at a medium effort, we know an intervention has to happen really soon.
And it would be great if that intervention isn't what today is typical for them. Again, having that second look, having an earlier indication if something is in fact going wrong, And even if we slow an exacerbation or we trim down the effects of an exacerbation, you know, the goal again is quality of life and the ability to keep you out of the hospital. So it is all about going as early as we can to fight against that exacerbation of symptoms.
And my understanding is that you connect the daily monitoring with the ability to do telemedicine. So when there's a problem, it's relatively simple. Is that a current offering, or is that what's coming next?
What's coming next?
Awesome. Yeah. I can only imagine how much this period of time, this ramp up of adoption of virtual care has impacted what you're doing. What are you most excited about just in terms of the market and how things are growing for you as a business for the latter half of 2020?
We're really excited to begin to get the platform in the hands of users, right? And entering into pilot studies in Q4 of this year. So it's moving very, very quickly. So I'm most excited about seeing the immediate impact and the feedback, especially as we work to build further evidence so that we can develop further parts of the solution.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Stacie, Nirinjan, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. And more importantly, thank you for the work you're doing to improve respiratory health and help people have healthy lungs and healthy lives.
Thank you.
All right. Be well. Stay healthy.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.